We've been spending most of our lives living in a striker's paradise, Matt. In our co-main event this weekend, we have Cub Swanson taking on Giga Chikadze, and I absolutely love the matchup because for Giga Chikadze's last time out, he ended up with Jamie Simmons, and it wasn't the matchup that we thought he was going to get. There was talk of a ranked lightweight, there was talk of a top 10 ranked possible featherweight. Now all of a sudden he gets that call. And then it's weird what happened today because you had good fighters leaving the top 15 because of inactivity, but why is Yair Rodriguez still ranked? I'll never know. But Giga Chikadze, now ranked 14th. Cub Swanson, now ranked 15th. How neat is that? I won't go into it, but if you look at it for both of these guys, Chikadze on a tidy little win streak for Cub Swanson, he had lost, but then you look at some of the names, and I wrote them down, but you go through his overall body of work. He's fought the best level of competition for the longest time. And then even in his 3 last losses, let's go through them. Frankie Edgar, Renato Moicano, Shane Burgos loses by split decision. Then he beats Kron Gracie. That was a weird fight. Then he beats Daniel Pineda. And I'm going to throw it on over, Matt. YouTube community tab. I threw it over there today. I said co-main event banger at featherweight. Who's getting the win? 68% of 700 votes right now have Chikadze to win. And to go through some of the comments, I mean, Wyatt Kenny said, Cub Swanson looked really good against Daniel Pineda. It won't be an easy fight for Giga. And people piled on. And other people said, Rafael Alvarez said, yo, make a vids for the upcoming fights. Rafael, we're doing it right now. But the point of it is, a lot of people are going with Giga Chikadze in the comments section. They're really kind of taking away from that Cub Swanson performance. In that first round, Daniel Pineda looked pretty good with the leg kicks. And then Cub Swanson's boxing started to come through, and a combination of the boxing, him kind of rocking Pineda, and Pineda's horrible gas tank were a great reason for Cub Swanson to get a win there.
You're too hard on Daniel Pineda for that fight, and we've never talked about this until now, but I'm airing that laundry. Sometimes fighters don't look bad, it's just the other guy looks good. And fighting is a two-person sport where sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose. That night, Cub Swanson just looked good. I wish I could have a more in-depth analysis, but what did he do? He defended the takedown attempts of Daniel Pineda. What did he force Daniel Pineda to do? Boxing the outside with him. What's almost impossible to beat Cub Swanson at a mixed martial arts fight? Boxing on the outside with him. Now, we have seen people at featherweight have success against him, and it is weird because he doesn't really lose to a certain type of fighter. Cub Swanson has trouble with certain body types. And when I look at Giga Chikadze, he kind of is that body type that Cub Swanson has struggled with in the past. Guys who have range on him who are primary strikers. Think of the Max Holloways of the world. Think of even the Renato Moicanos. Moicano's not some dangerous, heavy-handed striker, but just think about that fight. Drops Cub Swanson with a very fast jab, and that was really the key to that fight. It was the speed, not the power, and then once it's on the mat, he chokes out Cub Swanson pretty quick. They're going to tell you a lot about how Cub Swanson has a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and I'm sure he does, but there's going to be we're going to have to start differentiating jiu-jitsu black belts. You have guys who actually use it in their fights and who actively practice their jiu-jitsu because it's a real part of their MMA game plan. It's something that they go to. And then you have guys who have Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts, but it's just something that they have, and it's not really a skill that they keep on refining. I don't look at Cub Swanson, and the first thing, I don't really think about his black belt when I think about Cub Swanson. On the mat, I've seen him just get outclassed by too many guys at this point to really put a lot of sway and put a lot of confidence into his black belt. Cub Swanson has good scrambles off the bottom, but my issue is that even on top, look at his fight with Doo Ho Choi. He's in full mount on Doo Ho Choi, who doesn't have some crazy grappling background, and Doo Ho Choi just bucks him off. If you have a jiu-jitsu black belt against a guy who has no grappling background whatsoever and you're in full mount, you should not be able to get bucked off so easily by someone who I'm not going to call Doo Ho Choi some kind of amateur, but still, in the grappling department, he's not nearly as a refined grappler as Cub Swanson is supposed to be, so I'm just kind of taking that part out of this game. At the end of the day, this is one of those classic strikers matchups, and in the Pineda fight, it was weird. I picked Pineda. I thought Cub Swanson with the ACL, he wouldn't be the same fighter, but at the end of the day, you kind of knew. Well, Pineda's great at grappling. He has some success in the striking, but the majority of the time, his success is in grappling. Cub Swanson's success is in the feet. So at the end of the day, if Swanson could defend the takedowns and force Pineda to become a striker, well, Swanson could win that fight. My issue is that if Cub Swanson's going to go out there and try to win a striking fight with Giga Chikadze, I just don't know how he's going to close that distance in a safe way. And I really do think that's the proper way to say it. Cub Swanson can close distance on anybody. He's not afraid to take take a shot to give too. And we all kind of know and like everyone loves Cub Swanson because of that. There's not a lot of people who you see on Twitter and even who you talk to who like fights who are like, oh, I hate that Cub Swanson guy. Like he only has exciting fights and he has just like a good personality to go along with it. So Cub Swanson, he's always going to be a player at 145, whether you think he should be a ranked fighter or not. He's just got such a big name that a win over Cub Swanson still does great things for your career. And it's interesting too, right? Because we talked about the level of competition that Cub Swanson has been in there with. It's a lot of great fighters who he's come up short against, where with Giga, it's a lot of just kind of middle tier fighters who he's overperformed against. So it will be really interesting to see kind of what stage both these fighters are at when they do meet and just what this fight will turn into, because I know I might be speaking for both of us when I say this. I'm more excited for this fight than I am for the co-main event. Like, I'm this excited for this weekend's co-main.
You look at the names that he was supposed to face, and again, Mike Davis pops up a couple of times, Alex Caceres last year, and then he fights Omar Morales, then he fights Jamie Simmons. And if you look at it, it's weird, right? Because he gets the performance bonus his last time out. He finishes Jamie Simmons. That was pretty good. Simmons, primary wrestler, smaller guy. Like, he's more bantamweight, exactly. Not so much a featherweight. The knock on Giga, though, is always the output. And if you go look at his fights, the Austin Springer fight that was on Contender Series is weird because Giga, the striker, thought it was more like Giga, the striker and grappler, and more so grappler, and he engaged in some of those exchanges with Springer. He ends up getting finished. He went for some weird submissions in that one, too. It was an odd fight. The Brandon Davis fight and the Jamal Emmers fight, okay, you can harp on him a little bit. But then he started to open up a little bit against Erwin Rivera. And then he started to open up some more against Omar Morales, which was an interesting fight if we were really being honest with ourselves. And then a month later, he takes a quick one against Jamie Simmons, and we're off to the races. So finally, he gets a big name in Cub Swanson. It's a huge step up from anybody that he's faced in the past. Like, Brandon Davis fought, Zabit Magomed-Sharipov at one point. Cool for Brandon Davis. It was still Brandon Davis. Like, you know, Omar Morales is a good fighter at 155. But at 145, he kind of depleted himself a little bit. So, if the output's there for Giga, it'll be interesting to see what we get. If we look at the odds for this one, Giga Chikadze open a minus 121 favorite. He's a minus 139 right now. And the part where it gets interesting is as we film this, Chikadze was down to minus 204, and he's a minus 159 right now. So, I was reading off the wrong number. But yeah, he went minus 125 all the way to minus 200, then minus 201, 202, and now he's a minus 159. So the lines changed big time today in favor of Cub Swanson, who sits roughly at a plus 132. A lot of people liking Cub Swanson, or maybe just one. And then if you look at the total Tapology votes, surprised us, it is to you, 1,065 total, 72% going Chikadze, 76% by decision. And I want to comment on that last one for Swanson, because the Crone Gracie fight was weird. Like, none of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu academies would let Cub Swanson train Jiu-Jitsu for that one.
That's weird.
Oh, we got one over on him. And then they decided to box, and Crone Gracie, not a boxer. Chris Avila got a big one recently, but other than the Diaz brothers, like out of that camp, I don't think of Crone Gracie as a boxer. And for Cub Swanson, his last time out, again, Pinheiro was having tons of success with the leg kicks, and then all of a sudden they started to box, and Cub Swanson boxed them up. So it's an interesting fight nonetheless.
It comes down to this for me. There's two fundamental questions I have to ask myself going into this fight. A, can Cub Swanson handle the power of Giga Chikadze? And I don't think Giga's this massive power threat at the division. Like, we talk about his striking, and he's a very, very good striker, but I don't think he hits harder than, like, a Josh Emmett, or I don't think he hits harder than even a Calvin Kattar. I just think he's an extremely technical striker, and when you're as technical as he is, you're going to find the holes in your opponent's defense, and sometimes you're going to put them down, sometimes you're not. I just wouldn't always look at Giga and think, wow, because of his background in striking, I'm always going to expect a knockout. Because, again, in that Jamie Simmons fight, I do think, like, that head kicks can knock out pretty much anybody, but Jamie Simmons was not the appropriate opponent to be in there with Giga on that night. And my other question is Giga going to face the adversity Cub Swanson's going to make him go through? Because here's the one thing about Cub Swanson. You don't tend to beat him easily. Like, if you beat Cub Swanson, you got to go through hell to do it. And he's not some guy who's just going to go out in the first round. So, for me, it's how does Giga absorb just the pressure of Cub Swanson? And if Cub Swanson eats the power of Chikadze, will he go down due to it? Or are we going to get one of those vintage Cub Swanson performances where he can basically eat whatever's thrown at him and then respond with 2 or 3 shots? I Gotta go with Giga Chikadze at the end of the day, though. We're in the Swanson fight. When you thought about it, okay, if he makes Pineda be a boxer, he can win that fight. If you force Chikadze to strike with you, you're just doing what he wants. And with Swanson, he never was a great wrestler. He's got good trip takedowns. They're kind of similar to Alistair Overeem, if anything, where he kind of rushes towards and tries to get that body to body, and then he can rush around to the back. He does have decent trip takedowns, but he doesn't have one of those collegiate backgrounds that I really can kind of rely upon to get someone like Chikadze down. So at the end of the day, I've got to pick Giga Chikadze.
It's a tricky one. It really is. I mean, for Cub Swanson, again, he's only lost to some of the best, and maybe you don't like Moicano, maybe you're not a huge Shane Burgos fan, but they're still pretty good fighters, especially in this division. It's a tricky one. If you go by the numbers, it's very, very close. I mean, in terms of percentages, you have slight edges in favor of Cub Swanson as far as what he lands, but he absorbs a little bit. The striking defense about the same. Cub Swanson definitely the more effective in terms of grappling. But I do have a hard time with it. I'm ever so slightly going with the Georgian fighter here. And I think the thing is, that higher work rate. If we do see the higher work rate out of Chikadze, and if we're able to see him kind of circle away from some of the issues that Cub Swanson could kind of pose his way, I think Giga Chikadze has it. But it is tricky, and that live movement, it's got to scare you a little bit.
It does to a certain degree, just in case someone knows something that we don't. But again, at the end of the day, can Swanson knock out Giga Chikadze? Yes, he can. It wouldn't be a surprise at all if Swanson goes in there, lands some overhand right, George Roop style. Shout out to George Roop. That was a great knockout by Swanson. Knock his mouth guard out, and we're all back on the Killer Cub train. It's just with Giga, he's such a good counter striker that if Cub really does open up and does get wild with his power, that's when Chikadze is going to find that opening to land with his own shots. But again, I cannot stress just how excited I am for this weekend's co-main event.
Big time fight between Cub Swanson and Giga Chikadze. We're both going with George's own Giga Chikadze to get the win. Can't wait for our main event. You have Dominick Reyes, the former title challenger, taking on the former Rise and light heavyweight champion Jiri Prochazka. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.